Welcome to the Science of Calm, the online summit for exploring science-forward and holistic approaches to cultivating deep calm and nervous system regulation. It's your go-to for tips, tools, and protocols from world-class experts and pioneers in their field so that you can be proactive with your health and have more calm. I'm Wendy Johnston, and I will be your host today. I would like to take this moment at the beginning to just bring us into a little breathing, just a little tiny bit of breath. So, if I may, I will just extend the invitation to close your eyes, or you can leave them open if you want to. And let's just drop those hands down wherever they feel comfy and just start to let all the tension leave those shoulders. You can give the shoulders a little shake if you want to. And just starting to come into the body. And we're going to take a nice deep breath in through the nose, all the way down to the belly. And we're going to exhale out the mouth. Just kind of nice and noisy, really letting ourselves enjoy that vibration. In through the nose, all the way to the belly, and out through the mouth. Letting those shoulders drop. Releasing tension in through the nose, all the way to the belly, and out through the mouth. And last one, in through the nose, and out through the belly, or out through the mouth. And as we start to flicker our eyes open a little bit, I would like to take this moment to tell you a little bit about our guest today. Her name is Darla Meulemans. She is a master level brain performance and mindset coach who has dedicated her career to promoting resilience in individuals and organization through education and skill enhancement related to brain health, nervous system regulation, and self-healing. Darla founded Awakening Whole Brain Wisdom online programs and the Self-Healed Mind Inner Circle community in 2020 in response to increased need for access to mental health during the pandemic. She provides personal and professional development coaching, as well as performance training and neurotherapy, and she continues to offer her in-person and online programs integrating neuroscience, mindset, somatic healing, and lifestyle medicine to support trauma healing and the restoration of emotional balance and whole brain wisdom. Additionally, Darla is a lead instructor with the EEG Institute based in Woodland Hills, California, where she's recognized internationally for her role in educating and mentoring health professionals in the clinical application infralow neurofeedback brain training. Darla is a certified qualified mental health professional and an Palmer Method neurofeedback practitioner and mentor. She holds additional certifications in addiction, behavioral medicine, and holistic nutrition. Welcome, Darla.
Thank you, Wendy. It's so
Oh my
great to be here.
gosh. You have got some bag of tricks, don't you? You've got all kinds of tools in there.
I hope so, and I have never run out. So
I love
that's the hope for everybody is that there's, as I said earlier when you and I were speaking, like this bottomless toolkit that if something doesn't work, reach in again.
right, right. I know. I love it. I love it. It's that generous heart that wants to make sure, you can help no matter what. Even if you can't, you know someone who can.
That's right.
So I would like to start out our discussion with a little bit about your journey and what brought you to your mission, which is to help people awaken the wisdom within and harness the power of their mind and body through self-healing and self-care.
Well, where to begin?
I
Really?
know.
I mean, I can go all the way back to childhood probably because I think as a very highly sensitive person growing up, I felt like I didn't belong in some ways. I felt um like I didn't know where to look for calm.
Mm,
And what I really discovered through my adolescence, young adulthood, and my career is that self understanding is key and self care is key. And really, I decided at a very young age that I wanted to understand myself, I wanted to understand other people. And the more knowledge that I had, the more I could apply it to myself and others. And I knew probably from eighth grade that I wanted to support other people. And I guess the more that I've learned and continue to learn about the brain and about nervous system regulation and all things human, really, it continues to help me on my own journey of self healing. And I really have the honor of guiding and mentoring people from all over the world in their healing journey and in their process of self discovery.
well, I am so grateful that our audience gets to glean your words of wisdom today. This is such a treat. So we were talking a little bit before the interview, and I think one of the things that really brought me to your work is the practicality that you speak to. And I'm so like, it's just such an honor and it's so wonderful when you meet somebody who has all of this knowledge, right? And they can actually really portray, like, give it in a way that we can really understand it and receive it in such a nice, practical way. So, that being said, we are going to unpack
Mhm.
neuroplasticity in relation to nervous system regulation.
Yeah.
So, let's start with what the heck is neuroplasticity and how can we like how can we apply it to our nervous system and feel a little bit more regulated?
Yeah. Well, first of all, even without us knowing that this is happening, neuroplasticity is a truth. And you might remember, some of you might remember, um, a campaign years ago was an anti-drug campaign where they showed a frying pan and eggs going into the
Yes.
frying pan. And we all were terrified that, if we killed our brain cells, that, um, it was over, which was a pretty effective campaign for
It was
for
good.
some people. Um, and not that I'm here like promoting go out and, kill your brain cells. In fact, a lot of what I will be talking about today and a lot of what I do is really supporting
Mm,
neuroregeneration and supporting brain health. And this idea of neuroplasticity basically is that we have a built in capacity for self healing. We have
mm.
a built in function that is trying to right ourselves, like the weebles that wobble, but they don't fall down. There's
Okay.
there's
Work
something that
themselves
is
back.
always pulling us back into a state of balance and homeostasis. And that's what neuroplasticity is. It's our ability to adapt, our ability to regenerate, our ability to compensate when maybe one part of our brain isn't working the way that we want to. Um, and really, what I work with people on is helping them to maximize their potential for self regulation, maximize your brain's ability to rid itself of toxins and to do what you want it to do when you want it to do it. And so we talk about flexibility of state, being able to shift gears when you want to. For example, when you're trying to fall asleep at night, if your brain is active, guess what?
Mhm.
You don't fall asleep, or you fall asleep and you're still working while you're sleeping, and you have vivid dreams. And You don't feel rested in the morning. So we need to have this ability to be able to quiet down, or down regulate. We also need to be able to upregulate. We need to be able to step on the gas when we need to. We need to be able to reel in our attention and our focus when we want to. So, a lot of what I do with people is help with this flexibility of state. I help, um, with the brakes and steering that we all need to be able to guide us in decision making and problem solving. I help with regulation of arousal, so we're not stuck in this emergency mode all the time. And we'll be talking a little bit more about these patterns coming up here. So, in sum, neuroplasticity is just your brain's ability to morph and change and adapt and adjust. And at the heart of it is innate health, is a naturally occurring resilience.
Yeah. So you talk a lot about the brain's autopilot mode. And by that, I mean just the fact that sometimes we just feel so stuck in stress and we're
Mhm.
overthinking and we're just doing so much self-doubt. And can you speak a little bit to the brain being on autopilot
Yeah.
and how we can utilize neuroplasticity, like how we can find a little bit of relief from that, I
Yeah.
suppose.
Well, let's look at the pros and the cons of being an autopilot, right? So, the
Right.
pros of being an autopilot, think about, have you ever been driving across town and all of a sudden you're like, how did I get here?
Mhm.
And because your mind was actually doing something else while you were driving, through downtown. And so autopilot can actually serve us, and we do pretty well in autopilot most of the time, unless we're really dysregulated. Where autopilot doesn't serve us is when we have, gotten locked into certain habits or certain patterns, when we have learned, fears or phobias, when our autopilot is dysregulated somehow, it's either overactivated or underactivated. Um, and so we want to be able to work with our nervous system and with certain networks in our brain so that we can access a regulated state more often. So we're all going to get dysregulated. I mean, it
Mhm.
doesn't matter how much work you
Oh,
do,
yeah.
you're going to have moments where you get dysregulated. And what I want people to understand is that being dysregulated isn't the problem. Not returning from dysregulation is where the problems start to come in.
Yeah.
So, in therapy, people talk about like the ruptures that can happen when we get dysregulated and we maybe pounce on our child, for, doing something. And the rupture, if we could prevent it and not do it, that would be ideal, right?
Right.
But the repair is what's most important. It's the coming back. So, same with being dysregulated. We're all going to get out of balance,
Yep.
and that's okay, and I want people to understand that piece. But what's not okay is setting up camp there and just accepting that this is just how it is, because it's not true. It's not true. Every person, regardless of their state of being, even, um, the most dysregulated state, has within their reach that possibility. Gabor Mate talks about the compassion of possibility, and that it's
Mhm.
really having this expectation that anyone in any moment in time can show up as their best self.
Yeah.
So I'm not super concerned about the autopilot mode unless autopilot is dysregulated to an extent that that
Mhm.
person's locked in there
Yeah.
and that they don't know how to come back. And so, um, that's really what my mission is to help people return to themselves.
And so, can you explain a little bit about our brain's network and its influence, like the brain's networks, how they influence these patterns, and
Yeah.
and just how we can reset and rewire them?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how?
And let me do this in the simple way. I like to geek
Sure.
out on brain stuff.
Yes,
So
please.
this is like roll up my sleeves and let's talk about this. So we have lots of different networks in the brain, and we are still discovering, neuroscientists are still discovering networks in the brain. In fact, a
Yes.
client of mine today said, "Did you read that article in the Oregonian on Tuesday?" And I said, "I didn't. Will you please send it to me?" And then even just maybe a year or two ago, we started to learn about this network called the SCAN network, the Somatosensory Cognitive Action Network, undiscovered up until that time. So, but the network that I primarily focus my work on is something called the default mode network.
Mm.
That is the autopilot network.
Mhm.
That is that is the network in our brain that is most active when we are doing nothing.
Mm.
And that is actually the network that we need to address for deep healing. And
Mm.
it's the network that, think about rest and restoration. It's when
Yeah.
we're not involved in a particular task. We're not problem solving. Um, it is the network, the default mode network is the part where our mind kind of wanders and drifts and daydreams, and there can be wonder and beauty in that.
Yeah.
And there can also be problems in that, right? If
Rumination.
you're trying to rumination, attention regulation problems,
Yeah.
overactivity in this default mode network can look like OCD, it can look like anxiety, it can look like panic attacks. And then underactivation in this network can look like brain fog,
Mm.
uh, cognitive problems, cognitive decline, like we see maybe in Alzheimer's or dementia. Um, and this is an opportunity to kind of talk about our most common mental health symptoms are depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people think that anxiety is because of overactivation. And yes, it is. It's also the result of getting stuck in high arousal and not being able to come back
Yeah.
into kind of
Safety.
the state of restoration. But people think about depression on the other end of that. They think about that as being low arousal, and it's actually not. Depression is our body's natural wisdom and compensatory response when we have been pushed beyond our window of tolerance, when we have gone outside of what we can handle.
Hmm.
And so our nervous system has this brilliance that says, okay, I know how to help you. I'm going to switch off and I'm going to shut down right now. And that's going to look like low motivation. That's going to look like low energy. That's going to look like a depressed mood. For some people, that can look like dissociation, where they just like are like, okay, cannot be here anymore. No longer does this feel safe and like a place I want to show up. That can look like fainting for some people. So these patterns show up differently for different people. And the patterns that we talk about are arousal. And that's, we want to be able to shift our state of arousal. As I mentioned earlier, you want to be in a low arousal state when you're trying to fall asleep, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be in a high arousal state if somebody cuts you off in traffic, because you want to be able to react and respond super quickly. You want to be in kind of that zone of appropriate arousal when you want to have key performance. So you want to be alert and awake, but you also want to be calm and centered. So arousal is our first pattern. Our second pattern has to do with an instability in state, which means that we can get overactivated very, very quickly. And what's happening at a network level and at a kind of circuitry level is that there's too much excitation going on all at once
Yeah.
and not enough localized control. And so what this looks like for people, this is called hyperexcitability, where the person just flies into a state of chaos. So think about a migraine headache. Somebody's totally fine, and then all of a sudden, massive pain, right? Think
Mm-hmm.
about a panic attack. No particular trigger necessarily, but all of a sudden there's all this excitation and our heart is racing and we're sweating and we're emotional. And we're producing more stomach acid and So this is a hyperexcitable state.
Hmm.
So panic attacks, mood swings, seizure activity,
Oh.
migraines, and then autoimmune conditions fall into that same pattern of dysregulation. In fact, every chronic disease, when somebody comes to me and they present what they're struggling with, whether it's mental health or physical health problems, I'm thinking in terms of these patterns because it helps me know what tools and what interventions I want to use. So we've got arousal, we've got instabilities. The third one just has to do with localized dysfunction that can be the result of genetic issues. It can be the result of a brain injury or an insult to the brain. And injuries aren't just about contact. An injury can happen from a traumatic experience. We can actually form lesions in our brain because of hardship in our lives. So we want to understand what functional areas of the brain are responsible for certain things that we're trying to do in our daily life. And when a person's struggling with certain performance areas or certain level of function, we know what parts of the brain we need to target with our interventions. And then the fourth pattern has to do with what's called disinhibition. So this is somebody who doesn't have good brakes and steering. So this is maybe a person who everything that's in their mind comes out their mouth. This is maybe a person who flies into a rage episode. This is a person who maybe is silly or reckless or impulsive. And disinhibition can show up as a lot of different things for people. It can show up as emotional disinhibition, which would look like reactivity, which would look like worrying, rumination. It can show up as more mental and cognitive challenges. So a person who's not able to focus, maybe doesn't have that top-down inhibitory control or good brakes and steering. And that's primarily a function of the prefrontal lobe. And again, different interventions for that. And then our last pattern has to do with learned fears and habits. And this can be pre-verbal, this can be prenatal, this can be patterns that started to get locked into our nervous system as a result of maybe stress um, of our mother. This can be maybe early developmental trauma or other developmental conditions like autism or learning disorders or things like that. So those learned fears and habits can be rooted in our genetic line, in our upbringing. And again, we need to help that brain shift these patterns and rewire itself so that its default mode isn't one of these dysregulated patterns.
Nice. That's a really nice way. It seems like they would be pretty fluid. Like
They
it's
overlap.
yeah.
Is that what you mean by fluid?
Yeah, and it seems like maybe they would change from like they could change a little bit from day to day, or is
I think that's true. I think people tend to have certain patterns that are more primary for them. Most
yeah.
people have arousal regulation troubles where they're not able to shift.
How could we not?
Yeah, many people are locked in this state of high arousal, for example. Some people don't have any problems with inhibitory control at all. They've got a good ability to make decisions and problem solve and plan and organize and shift gears. They're not emotionally reactive. So some people don't have that. Some people are more prone to instabilities or hyperexcitability, maybe because there's a genetic predisposition. So migraines tend to run in families. Depression can run in families. ADHD can run in families. OCD can run in families. Um, so, we take into consideration somebody's genetics, but we also, here's another concept, right? Epigenetics.
Yeah.
So, epigenetics and neuroplasticity are like my two favorite things to talk about because what epigenetics is basically that we're not locked into um, certain genes manifesting. So, I remember as a teenager, my mother would always say things like, "Oh, I'm so sorry you've got bad genes."
Oh
And
no.
and I remember at that point in time saying, it doesn't matter. I'm not buying into it.
Good job.
Already as a teenager, I was like, nope, I don't care that I'm predisposed to this. I want to figure out how I don't manifest, this autoimmune condition, which was, that was pretty much my whole family line on my mother's side was full of really serious autoimmune conditions. And I myself have been diagnosed with those and also don't show the markers for those anymore. So um, that's self-healing kind of at its best. So yeah, so is it fluid? Are there times when we are stuck in high arousal because we just, there's more stress going on in our environment? Are there times where we might have a flare up of an instability? So autoimmune conditions is a great example that people can have flare ups of certain things, and usually stress is is involved
Yeah.
almost 100% of the time. So yeah, to that extent, we can be gripped by certain patterns at certain times in different ways.
So, how can you use these patterns to kind of help facilitate self healing and move them in that direction?
Yeah, well, I think, my whole mission is around, having people understand about the brain and the nervous system and the body. I'm a huge proponent of body literacy. And
That.
the main reason is because I feel like when we understand something, it takes the mystery out of it. It
Mhm.
takes the fear out of it. And it also allows us to know kind of how to move in certain directions. So, like, if you understand a little bit about how your car works, for example, and you go
Mhm.
out and your car is not starting, you, instead of, throwing your hands up and going belly up, you become your own resource to say, I can call AAA. That would be easy. But there might be some really simple things that I can do. Like maybe the car is not in gear. Like maybe it's not in
Yeah.
park. And so
And heading in
it's
this direction. So,
exactly. So the idea here is that having an understanding about the workings of your mind and your body helps you know what to do, helps you problem solve, helps you troubleshoot, takes the fear out of it. And we all know that when we're locked in fear, we can't access our wisdom as well. So, the other thing that happens when we have this understanding about ourselves, we then also have compassion and more understanding for other people. And so this can improve the quality of our relationships with people. It can reduce conflict. So, um, so when we understand these patterns, it's power. It's empowering to us. It helps us be more self-sufficient, helps us develop self-trust and self-confidence. Um, and it helps us know where to look for answers. So instead of like shutting down and just saying, I'm stuck, there's no way I can go anywhere. We then move into problem solving mode, which is a natural state of resilience for us as human beings. So we can work with these patterns. And part of what I teach in the self-healed mind is different strategies, different, this bottomless pit of a toolbox that we have that
yeah.
we just keep reaching
Heck
in.
yeah.
There are different tools that will be more effective for certain patterns of dysregulation. So, for example, with instability, what are instabilities? It's an imbalance. And so we think about how do we cultivate more balance in our nervous system.
Mhm.
So there's, the main things that I talk about in terms of self-healing are breath. And we started with a great, simple little breathing exercise. Your breath is with you everywhere you go. So that's one of the first things that I teach people is how to regulate their nervous system through breath. And we can upregulate or downregulate. So downregulate. So if we slow down our breathing, particularly our exhale, we are sending a signal to our nervous system that all is well. And
Mhm.
that's what all of this is about. That's what neuroscience is about. That's
Right.
about signaling to our brain from our body and from our brain to our body that everything's okay. So, breath work is one of the best ways to regulate your nervous system. So, it's going to calm down arousal, and arousal and instabilities are tied to each other, because you're more prone to fly into an unstable state of being if you're um, in high arousal,
Yeah.
you know? So you're more likely to have a flare up of your autoimmune condition if you're in stress mode. You're more likely to have a migraine if you're stressed. You're more likely to have a panic attack. So you're more likely to have a seizure if you're stressed. So knowing how to use your breath,
Keep
and
that
you can,
calm.
yes, and you can upregulate too. You can do quick breaths if you want to wake your brain up and raise your pulse. So we get to do all of these things. So breath, sound, and movement are really three important things that we can be doing for ourselves,
What about
not just
sound? How do you use
breath,
sound?
sound, and movement. Well, sound, we can make sound. Okay, here's a little interesting thing
Mhm.
about the default mode network. Guess what sound every person's brain attunes to most?
I would think a hum. Maybe. I'm not
A
sure.
hum for sure, but get whose hum? Your own.
Yeah.
So our brain attunes most to the sound of our own voice.
Mm.
So I remember my friend, I had the honor and privilege of being with her for a home birth of her first
No.
child.
Right?
And I remember she was having a water birth. And I remember her midwife saying, bring down the tone of your sounds
Hmm.
because we can self soothe with sound. So, humming, singing,
Mhm.
just like you said, make it a noisy exhale,
Mhm.
sighing. So, doing like that kind of sigh can help us. But what this midwife was saying, because my friend was going, like with every contraction, she said, just lower the tone of that. So, ah, like a lower tone. What does it do? It signals safety to
Exactly.
your nervous system. So, choosing sounds that feel comfortable to you. So, sound therapy, super effective. The other thing, you know, it helps if somebody's having trouble falling asleep at night, like listening to certain sounds can help with certain biorhythms. Jeffrey Thompson's got a whole series of sounds that are oriented towards certain brainwave patterns. There's also some science that talks about if we can bring our mind into a place of feeling abundant, that also helps us quiet down and lowers our arousal level. So Deepak Chopra has a wonderful 21-day abundance meditation that's wonderful for listening
My
to.
God, it's wonderful.
So sound, there's different sound therapies. There's actually a new program that I'm trying out right now that's in its pilot phase. That's based on Dr. Stephen Porges's work with the polyvagal theory, and it's really working at that level of the default mode network. So sound again invites us into like a warm bath. And so, whatever sound we can listen to that is soothing to our nervous system, and again, the sound of our own voice. So, I did a whole talk last year on the neuroscience of self talk because we can use our words against us. And also, when we're thinking about consumption, pay attention to what you're listening to. So, if you're listening to something that raises your pulses, there's a particular, um, it's not an ad, but it's whatever is going on the radio here. There's a local ad company that their whole messaging is fear tactics, and anytime it comes on, I just switch it
Yeah.
off. 'Cause my pulses get raised listening to what they're talking about.
Mhm.
So be in choice about what you're exposing yourself to in terms of sound. Sound healing's super powerful.
Mhm.
Um, so be choosy about who you're doing that kind of work with because it can really open you up in a wonderful way. And then there's lots of things that you can do on your own with sound. But again, your own tone, your own voice, your own self talk that's the most healing to your default mode network.
I love it.
And then let me just touch on
Yeah.
movement real quick.
Yes, I was hoping.
So,
I was like,
so yeah, breath, sound, and movement. Lots of different ways that we can move our body. And we would want to choose a way that is informed by our nervous system. So if doing a certain kind of movement does not feel good to you, trust that.
yeah.
So, somebody might say, oh, Pilates is awesome. And you might go to Pilates and you might have a trauma response when you're there working your core because you've maybe experienced something that was traumatizing to that area of your body. So listen to and trust your body. Don't push through any kind of movement, but cross lateral movements in general. So things that cross that midline of the body. So like the Celtic weave
Mm.
is something that think about like a hula dancer and that
Oh,
movement that the hula dancers are doing. That helps to integrate the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere of the brain. And when we're talking
brilliant.
about whole brain wisdom, we
Ah,
want right and left function to be balanced.
that's
We want
exciting.
top of the brain, bottom of the brain, Tai Chi, Qigong, that type of
But
movement, yoga, wonderful movement. And even I would say touch also, like there's ways that we can touch that activate and stimulate and tone our vagus nerve that has, these it has all of its wings that come
yeah,
up into our brain and go down into our belly. And so we can do touch with tapping or with just some gentle massage that can also help. So yoga, breath, sound, movement, touch, all these wonderful tools. And these are all things that you can apply on your own. And then I would also say there are many, many very gifted and skilled practitioners in our world that do somatic release work, that do trauma healing, that can teach you about therapeutic shaking, that can do EMDR. Again, that's movement, that's eye movement, but
yeah.
that's about brain integration. We were talking about that earlier. Um, so there's a place for professionals in nervous system regulation for sure. And there's so much that you can do on your own.
I love it. So when it comes to chronic stress
Mm.
and trauma, how can we kind of use neuroplasticity to get in there and
Yeah,
work with
heal.
that?
Yes. First of all, um, stress is not all bad. And we've heard people talk about, even some wonderful events in your life, weddings, um, new jobs, like things that are wonderful can cause really high levels of stress for people.
Yes.
So, um, but stress can be useful also, as I mentioned earlier. If a car cuts in front of you, you need that stress response. You need to go into a high state of arousal and activation
Quick.
so that you protect yourself. So the stress response in itself is inherently wise because it's trying to help you survive. It's trying to help you learn and adapt and, you know, thrive in your situation. Getting locked into that stress response. So when we're exposed to chronic stress or when
Right.
our nervous system doesn't have this flexibility to come back to a state of regulation, that's when this starts to become a problem. So a lot of people, they know about the fight or flight response, they know about rest and restore. That's, function of the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. And we also know that there's lots of different hybrid states in between. So Stephen Porges talks about the polyvagal ladder and that we can at either end, have a certain, we can be locked in fight or flight, we can be locked in rest and restore, but we can also um, have different levels of both of those happening simultaneously.
Mhm.
So, and all of it again is our nervous system's attempt at keeping us safe.
Mhm.
Um, and so it's important for people to understand these hybrid states too, because they can then kind of say, okay, I'm the kind of person that I'm a super high performer but I don't sleep at night. I'm hypervigilant. I don't know how to rest and enjoy myself, but I do great at work and I make a lot of money. And by everybody else's standards, I'm successful, but I'm internally freaking out.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's along one of those hybrid states where the brain is actually in this high state of arousal, but it's got one foot in the calm part because we can put on that face,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
So we want to be able to understand these different states and know how to work with ourselves to bring us back.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is, the more you practice any one thing, that's what you're going to get better at. So that's where neuroplasticity comes in here, is that we want to exercise and reinforce the patterns that we're wanting more of in our life. And because the stress response can be adaptive in certain situations, right? It
Mhm.
got you out of Dodge when you needed to stay safe.
Yeah.
But it becomes maladaptive when there's something that signals that you're not safe when you really still are. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So,
it totally does.
so we can, I'll give you an example. I was driving maybe a week or so ago, and on the side of the road, there was a group of teenagers. And I made up some story about like what was going on with these teenagers. Um, they were dressed in costume, and one of them had a plastic blade. Like maybe they were at like a Dungeons and Dragons thing, or that maybe they were doing something. But my brain quickly scanned to, it's not Halloween. It's like I couldn't make
That
sense out
makes
of it.
sense, this. What is
But
this?
guess what? My nervous system went into a state of high arousal. My pulse started racing and I had, like, I gasped actually, even though my brain was like, that's a plastic knife. These are a group of teens.
Right?
They're safe together. But somehow something signaled to me that it wasn't safe anymore.
Yeah.
So we want to be able to understand when that's happening for us and to have tools to be able to talk ourselves off the ledge and to come back to a state of regulation. So that if for some reason our brain signals that it's unsafe, that we still are able to go through this process where it's not just about like thinking ourselves positively, out of this state of distress, but actually having tools that bring us back instead of firing this direction of, oh no, oh no, oh no,
Mhm.
we have some fortitude in this other direction because we've cultivated this through
Yeah.
self-care and self-practices and doing what I call nervous system reset remedies on a regular basis. So repetition, practice, and learning in an adaptive way now is what's important for neuroplasticity and self-regulation.
So, can you speak a little bit to when we do these things in a habitual way? We bring these new techniques
Tools.
in. Yeah, how do they start to build new habits? Or they
Yeah, how does
start
that
to
work?
yeah? How does it work?
Well, anything you do on repeat strengthens that. So think about even like working out, right? If
Mhm.
you're repeatedly doing the same exercise, you build muscle.
Right.
So, so we want people to be building their resilience muscle. We want people to be building their self-regulated muscle. And how we do that is through repetition and routine.
Right.
And so the brain is constantly learning, constantly adapting, constantly growing, and neurons that fire together wire together. So if you're sending things down that pathway of panic and anxiety and worry, it's every single time you do that, that nerve is being myelinated. It's like having another layer of insulation put on it. So it's getting bigger and fatter, right? And
Mm-hmm.
stronger. And if we don't want that side of the tug of war to win, we want to also be giving the other team some players here, which means to practice a different kind of thought pattern. So resilience mindsets, gratitude, abundant thinking. And then also, so there's the cognitive aspect of it, there's the mindset aspect of it. But also when we're doing things like breath work, when we're doing things like mindfulness, meditation, yoga nidra, vagal toning exercises, these kind of things are again signaling safety to the nervous system so that it has a place to go home when it gets activated. We're going to get activated,
Yeah.
but we need to know how to go home.
Yeah. And not get stuck out there, as you say,
That's right.
It's not
That's right.
really
Don't
about,
set up camp there.
yeah,
Yeah.
don't set up camp. Come on back home. It
Yes.
feels good here.
We've talked about a lot today. We've talked about neuroplasticity. We've talked about patterns of dysregulation. We've talked about regulating the default mode network and different strategies. And really, the main thing is that whatever you can do that signals safety to your nervous system and put that on repeat is a good thing.
Yeah.
So I think people should schedule rest for themselves, not just sleeping at night, but
Yep.
schedule time where you can daydream. Schedule time when you're just listening to music. Schedule time where you're out in nature. Our mind, that default mode network actually rests a little bit better when we're out in nature. Um,
I
so
love what you
there's,
say about lifestyle. Um,
yeah,
so you say like, so you mentioned nervous system regulation, trauma healing, and lifestyle medicine as
yeah,
being key. I think
my
that's
gosh.
delicious. I love that.
Lifestyle medicine is in my mind key because it every single pillar of lifestyle medicine is about regulating your nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And my whole focus on nervous system regulation is because it is um, so integrated with every other system because
Mm-hmm.
we've got our digestive system, our cardiovascular system, our endocrine system, which is responsible for hormones, our emotional regulation system, our I'm probably forgetting many other systems. We have all of these systems, but they're all rooted in nervous system regulation. So you'll
Right.
have digestive problems if you're dysregulated in terms of your nervous system. You'll have cardiovascular problems. You'll have hormone problems. We are seeing more and more people with infertility issues and PCOS and endometriosis. So, all of that's linked to nervous system regulation and lifestyle medicine, which basically, number one step in lifestyle medicine is reduce your toxic load, reduce your stress in your life. Okay. We all know that stress doesn't serve our nervous system. Number two, pay attention to what you're feeding yourself. So in lifestyle medicine, they talk mostly about nutrition and they talk about whole foods and healthy fats and enough protein. And they also talk about certain anti inflammatory foods. And so nervous system dysregulation and inflammation are like also like this. You can't separate them. An inflamed nervous system is a dysregulated nervous system. A dysregulated nervous system is an inflamed nervous system. So nutrition is really important. What we're feeding ourselves in terms of those whole foods that are high in antioxidants, healthy proteins, healthy fats. But also in this part, I like to talk to people about what else they're feeding themselves. We talked about negative news. We talked about
Yeah.
gossip and social media influences. What are you feeding yourself with your own consciousness patterns and your own inner critic having a field day and putting you down? So nourish yourself with things that are good for you.
Yeah.
Third pillar of lifestyle medicine has to do with sleep. And sleep actually is when your default mode network is the most active
Mm.
in a restorative way. So we want our quality of sleep to be good. We want to be getting enough sleep.
Yeah.
So I talk a lot about sleep hygiene with people. Um, and then one of the other really important things that I often think about, Michelle Obama, in her book, talking about the importance of support and connection.
Mm.
And that, most people in the United States report that they either have zero or one person in their life that is a significant support person. And loneliness is an epidemic, right? Like we've
Yeah.
got this disconnect that's happened as a result of wonderful things like technology, But people have gotten so disconnected from the rest of the world and from attuning to themselves that we now are seeing big problems. So that fourth pillar of lifestyle medicine has to do with connection. And I take that and I talk about connection to self with that body literacy and that attunement and paying attention to the messages and the signals, a
Mhm.
connection to the world. We are humans, we are mammals, we are made to be in community. And in community, we are much, much stronger. So healing doesn't happen on our own. Healing happens in community. And so that's the other big piece that I talk about. That's why membership, having memberships, whether it's a faith community or whether it's a recovery community for our friends who are working on their sobriety, whether it's your primary family or a family that you've made your own, having some sort of connection, even our connection with our pets, is going to release certain chemicals and certain signals in our brain and in our body that help promote health and longevity.
I always love it. Like I do sound baths. I get a lot of sound baths,
Nice.
and oh, it's just my favorite. I think the collective and just seeing people in the how they kind of navigated at first, and it's so cute. Sometimes I'll just kind of look out and I'm just like, oh, look at how cute they all are. And they all have this really neat web of connectivity, and they're
Awesome.
all doing this experience, and it's something new, and they share in that. And there's just
Yes.
like,
Shared experience,
yeah, there's
such
just
value.
and like being vulnerable and sharing, and like, oh, it is juicy. Very, very cool.
And why is it so healing? Because guess what? We get to see ourselves in another and recognizing ourselves in another, being able to have compassion and empathy for what somebody else is going through, being able to have self compassion because we
Mhm.
see, wow, um, they struggle with something also, and I've been so hard on myself thinking that this is because something's wrong with me, and it's not that something's wrong with them, so it can't be that something's wrong with me either. This is just the experience that I'm having. So yeah, that community can be such a key player in helping us expand.
Yeah, and it's really exciting. I'm really appreciative of the fact that you've brought us so many different ways to be able to just kind of feel our dysregulation. I mean, you kind of feel it, and then coming back into safety again and finding that place. It really is such a gift. So, what would one final little piece of advice that you would give somebody who's starting their journey to rewiring their brain
Yeah.
and, yeah, enhancing their
Oh my
routine?
gosh. Well, to be honest, Wendy, I feel like we just scratched the surface here today.
No,
There's
no.
so much. But I would say, you know, trusting yourself, trusting the process, trusting that there's some, even without your understanding, there's something brilliant and important that's happening in your brain and your body, and that you can honor that, and then not trying to give yourself like a big overhaul all at once. A lot of times people feel like it's all or nothing. And they go into self-judgment, and then they put on the brakes and they stop making um themselves a priority in terms of change. So I would say keep it small. Like
Yeah.
for this week, think about one thing that we talked about today that will be on your mind and that you might want to do differently. And I would say, we have this opportunity to catch, cancel, and correct. When we
Mhm.
catch ourselves in a state or doing something, saying something, thinking something, having an experience that we're like, wait, that's not me. I don't want to do that. You can catch it. You can even say the word cancel, which is basically you're interrupting this pattern.
Oh, I
So
love
we
that.
want to do these pattern interrupters, and we want to redirect, we want to correct. And so, um, So doing something small that redirects you. We all are very well aware of what we are doing that is not supporting our health and well-being.
Hmm.
And we get caught in certain habits and they become easy.
Yeah.
And so we want these new healthy habits to also be easy. So think about ways that you can be consistently approaching your health um, in these baby steps and
Mm.
knowing that every choice you make is, it's an opportunity to move in the direction that you're wanting to go in. It's an opportunity to just be still and even um, being in neutral, you can still be having forward movement, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes because we've had so much momentum, we have to just pause for a minute and rest. And then there's choices that we can make that just like divert us from the direction that we want to go. And we're going to do that also.
Yeah.
And then you come back.
Yeah.
So again, it's in the return, it's in the coming back, it's in the consistency, and it's in just trusting that there's this brilliance that's inside of you, this wisdom that's inside of you that you can access anytime, any day with the guidance of others if needed and with your own really persistence. So
Love
that's
that.
really what I hope people take away.
Nice. So if you were going to choose your number one favorite way to come back to safety within yourself, what's
Mm.
your
Oh,
number one?
man.
Something that people could just take it and use it and love it. Do you have one?
Oh my gosh.
I know. I know.
I knew you were going to ask me this question too. And um, I don't have any one thing,
Yeah.
honestly,
Because
because
again, it's a tool bag, right?
it
So
is a tool bag, and there are some times when you will pull something from that bag that worked brilliantly last week when you were in this very same situation, and
how
you
about
try it
something
today
for
and it
overthinking?
doesn't work.
If someone's overthinking something.
Okay. So there are lots of options for overthinking. Again, just think about interrupting the pattern. So
Yeah.
distraction can actually interrupt the pattern.
Distract. Right.
So gratitude can interrupt the
Oh,
pattern of like if you're, overthinking something, particularly like self-critical maybe, or you're into self-doubt, then you can bring your attention to something you're grateful for that again, it's like a little distraction.
yeah, it's brilliant. Right.
Deb Dana talks about glimmers to glows. Deb Dana is a polyvagal informed therapist. She talks about finding something that's a glimmer for you, something that gives you that little bit of a thrill. In my world, like right now, I have these two little sparkling trees that I put up a couple of years ago after Christmas because my daughter didn't want to take the tree down because she loved the lights so much. And I
Aw,
thought, you know what? Lights are like, so they
they're
like
fun.
glimmer. They literally glimmer. And I can look around and I can place my attention on something that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So purposefully putting your mind onto something that's a glimmer. And then what Deb Dana talks about is savoring it like you would a good piece of chocolate. And you hopefully
That.
everybody likes chocolate. If you don't like chocolate, think about your favorite thing that you don't want to be in too much of a hurry to chew and swallow because you want that
Mm,
experience to linger and last. And so when you can take a glimmer and you can savor it, it turns into a glow and it starts to magnify. So I like to use my mind when I can, but sometimes that doesn't work. And so I would say breathing is the next thing that I would rely on.
yeah.
Um, or sometimes I just like give myself a little
Oh,
like, you're okay. You're okay.
I know it. It sounds, it's so like, it seems so simple, but it really is. It's so helpful. It's like sometimes the
Yes.
body just wants to be touched and loved on.
Yes. But honestly, I guess really, I probably use my breath more than I use my thought a
Yeah,
lot, but I use my breath. If
me
I'm
too.
thinking something I don't want to, I'm,
Yeah, I
I
love that.
quickly expel it. If I'm needing more of something, so I use my breath and my
That.
movement to pull something into me. So just ask yourself in those moments, like, what do I need? What do I need? I need a little sweetness. Okay, well, I'm gonna go and um, have a cup of tea with some stevia in it. That is like,
Mm.
mm,
That makes
So
me feel
just think
good.
about, probably every single one of you that's listening can think about 5 things right now that you do that make you go, "Hi." Remember that song? Things that make you go, "Ooh"?
Yeah.
Yeah. So come up with a list of a few things that make you say,
I love that. I love that. So, you brought our viewers a little free gift today. Would you like to tell us about it?
yes. Yes. So the Resilience Reset Personal Strategy Guide, don't get intimidated by the fact that it's over 100 pages long. You can move through this at your own pace as quickly as you want to. But it takes you through these steps of how to interrupt emergency mode. That's strategy number 1. And I give you techniques how to do this. Second step is really learning how to cultivate that body literacy. And so there's some strategies in there about attuning to yourself and listening and developing this skill called interoception, which is our ability to read these messages and these signals. And then there's a whole section in here on mastering your mindset and strategies around really adopting more of a resilience mindset. There's a whole section in this strategy guide around healing attachment wounds, and that's so key to um, trauma healing, but also understanding ourselves in relationship. And then there's stuff in there around emotional regulation and helping with the executive network and planning and organizing and taking action. And then there's also strategy 7, which talks about lifestyle changes and things you can do with nutrition and sleep and self-care that really help you maximize your potential and step into who you were made to be.
Yeah, that's such a generous. I love it. How beautiful. Ah, well, thank you so much, Darla, for joining us and for giving such
You.
practical tips and just showing us that neuroplasticity is not just for scientists,
No. No,
right?
nervous system health is at the heart of our lives and living long, productive, meaningful lives. And so, yeah, practical neuroscience and self healing, really important. So, again, I feel like we just scratched the surface here today,
I
and I hope
know.
that people enjoyed it, and I hope that they want to learn more. And if anything, I love to consider myself a resource. I love talking to people, whether or not they choose to work with me or not work with me. I offer everybody a free consultation where we can kind of map out what's showing up as patterns of dysregulation for them, and then helping them find resources. If I'm not able to offer them something, I like to try to help them find something within their community.
I
So
know.
don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, and it is. It's really important to just touch back in and yeah. So thank you so much for
Thank you,
joining
Wendy.
us today and make sure to click below and grab that. I think that is just such a generous gift. Thank you
I'm
so
so
much.
glad. I hope that people find it useful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you to everybody for tuning in today. And there's still more to come. So stay tuned. And yeah, let's see. We will have a Facebook recap tonight at 7 o'clock Central. And thank you very much for tuning in. And thank you again, Darla.
You're so welcome. Thank you for doing what you do. It's been an honor.
It. Thank you.